In 1999, Wirecard was one of the biggest financial services giants in the world, worth billions and rated in the top 100 powerhouses in the business world by Forbes magazine. But in just 9 days, the mega magnate crashed into oblivion. They weren't worth billions anymore. Now they owed billions. Here's how two men brought a $2 billion empire to its knees in just 5 days. In 1999, Germany needed to get with the times. Back then, the world was still steadily moving away from the physical banking system and into the age of virtual transactions. Europe needed a money middleman, very much like we have PayPal today. So Wirecard was founded. Getting the company running wasn't too hard. The time was ripe for an electronic transaction system, and investors weren't going to waste time getting in on the action. Wirecard blasted into the stratosphere right from the get-go. Marcus Brown, the founder and CEO, made the genius move to target two of the biggest industries in human existence: sex and gambling. Wirecard was rolling high on the vices of man in no time. They extended their reach to stock trading and investment banking 5 years after it was founded. And in the mid-2010s, Wirecard went from a few $100 million to billions. They went from a meager startup to being worth more than all of Germany's banks combined. And Brown wasn't alone. He had a man by the name of John Marsalek behind him. Marsalek was Wirecard's frontman in Asia. On paper, Marsalek was just an IT nerd, but what the rest didn't know is that he had ties to the Russian mercenary army. Marsalek earned a pretty big salary as an executive at Wirecard already, but he liked the finer things in life. His salary was not enough to cover his extravagant parties, clothes, cars, and his love for women. It was an open secret. Everyone knew he was spending company money, but no one really mentioned it. But what money was he spending exactly? Because in reality, Wirecard hadn't been making any profits since 2015. And yet, they were constantly expanding office space, hiring employees, and the numbers were sure showing how much they were growing every year. So how did they make it look like they were making billions when they were actually bankrupt and had been penniless for years at this point? Simple. Wirecard was licensed to operate in Germany, but not anywhere else. So they set up new companies, mostly in Asian countries. Those companies would send them invoices of sales that went through their offices. When those invoices got back to Germany, Wirecard would backlog them. Well, what does this mean? It meant they never made any sales. They just pretended to. They had all the paperwork to prove that they did, but no actual money ever went through Wirecard. No one thought to audit the enormous conglomerate, and the fact that everything was inserted manually into an electronic system meant that there was no way to really prove that those sales were fake. In those early days, the system just wasn't equipped to verify whether or not transactions were legit or not. So Wirecard was writing up a massive amount of transactions, but very little of it actually existed at all. Whenever investors had questions about the legitimacy of Wirecard's financial transactions, Brown would inform them that the company utilized state-of-the-art AI to manage the data. Computers don't make mistakes. The transactions and all of the information that came with it was faultless. However, it was just a bunch of Wirecard employees that were using regular old spreadsheets to manually organize data. No AI was ever in use. And if he wasn't dodging questions about the source of the funds, Brown took out massive loans every time the company's share prices dropped even with the slightest margin. These loans were secured with his personal 7% shareholding as collateral. Then, at the end of 2015, Wirecard couldn't account for €250 million on its books when the auditors came around. Brown blamed this on sleazy reporters that were out to short-sell Wirecard on the stock market.
I do not too much look into controversies.
And for a while, that bought Brown some time, but it did get reporters and the financial authorities interested in the company. Wirecard was under constant watch, but Brown liked to play dirty. Reporters that came snooping around were bombarded with emails that were designed to compromise their computers. While there has been no official confirmation that Wirecard employed hackers to electronically obstruct those journalists, the overwhelming volume of emails originating from the same sources exclusively targeting those who were investigating Wirecard is undeniable. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of malware sent to just a handful of journalists. And it was only the journalists who dedicated themselves to persistently pursuing Braun. Meanwhile, Wirecard had to keep the number of transactions going up, so they were sending their own money between their numerous branches. This created the appearance that money was moving in Wirecard. It didn't really matter that it was Wirecard's own money, just that there was traffic. Transactions were being logged, and that was showing on the books. Besides, they claimed that they were using third parties to process payments, and they just earned a commission on these payments. These third parties were all located outside of Germany, which made it harder to trace. 2019 would be the start of the downfall of Wirecard. When auditors realized that there was almost $2 billion unaccounted for, they raised the alarm. But Brown explained that their bank in the Philippines handled most of their transactions, and that the company was ready to get back to business after the misunderstanding. So what did the auditors do? They flew to the Philippines to continue their investigation. But when they arrived at the address, they found an old warehouse that had a family living in it. The man who lived there was extremely confused that his address was the same as the International Bank. Surely there must have been some mistake. This should have been a damaging scandal for Wirecard, but once again, they managed to escape the consequences. Right when this news came to light, SoftBank made a substantial €9 million investment in Wirecard, which somewhat mitigated the impact of the fraudulent bank address revelation. But the German Financial Crimes Unit had had Wirecard in their sights since 2015, and with the mounting speculation and inability to trace the company's transaction, they raided Wirecard's main office in Munich. After contacting every branch that Wirecard had across the globe, it became clear that there was no trace of the purported $2 billion. It was, in fact, entirely fictitious money, fabricated through manual accounting practices in an extensive financial deception and falsely categorized as profit. It took the police just 9 days to prove that the company was, in fact, completely built up around one big lie. Brown was arrested, but his business partner John Marsalek was gone with the wind. No one knows where he fled to. Most likely he's somewhere in Russia. He had enough contacts in the Russian military that it's most likely that he's hiding out there somewhere. However, the situation takes an even more scandalous turn. The UK government has voiced concerns, suggesting that Marsalek might have been overseeing a Russian espionage network in Europe and Asia. This potential connection could account for his low profile within Wirecard, as he rarely participated in interviews or large gatherings, deliberately flying under the radar. And in the middle of the pandemic, the public had other things to worry about. The Wirecard fraud went completely under the radar as global lockdowns were put in place, and people had more significant issues to focus on than two individuals who had misrepresented their wealth. It's not only the revelation of the fictitious money, it's the fact that thousands of retirees invested their life savings in the company. When Wirecard's stock plummeted from over €100 to zero, these pensioners lost everything. In the UK, some individuals relied on Wirecard to cover their utility payments, leaving them without heat or water in their homes for weeks. And let's not overlook the thousands of employees who had their livelihoods abruptly taken away within a week. They were the ones who truly experienced the massive theft they had unwittingly fallen victim to, bearing the brunt of the suffering. But the biggest question is, why did Brown get away with it for so long? Alarm bells were going off for 6 years before anything drastic was done to look into Wirecard. And what about Marsalek? Is he sipping vodka somewhere in the north? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. See you next time.